listening to the Kyle Mackey Podcast. Let's get this show started. Have you ever shared a brilliant idea only to find that others didn't get it, or felt a nagging sense that an interaction went wrong, even when the words seemed right? Well, thanks to Vanessa Van Edwards and her book, Cues, Mastering the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication, we may have the solution to what went wrong. Before I get into this, I just want to preface this book. So what we have right here, the Cues, Mastering the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication, it covers a lot. I think the next hour or so will act as a good introduction, but I do highly recommend that if you want to get the most out of this book and the information that you can gain from it, it would definitely be worth checking the book out, or checking out her website and all the extra material that she does offer, as I don't believe I'll be doing its full justice. It's just too much information to possibly get all out there in a single episode. That being said, I do think you'll still be able to gain a lot from this episode, and it's definitely worth listening to as an introduction. But just if you want to get the full depth of everything, it's definitely worth a read. But to jump right into this, for those of you who are not even sure what these cues are the powerful verbal, nonverbal, and vocal signals humans send to one another. Cues secretly shape the perception and predict behavior with surprising accuracy, influencing everything from job interviews to relationships. An example of this, for those of you who like Shark Tank, it's a show that I'm a big fan of. Can't say I watch it much on TV anymore. It's more on YouTube, watching just the single clips at a time, so of the full pitches. But back in the day, Jamie Siminoff, founder of Ring, his billion-dollar idea was almost derailed by a single bad pitch on Shark Tank because of the cues that he was giving off. They undermined his credibility. They ultimately spoke louder than his own words. He did a couple different things throughout it. He actually did a lot. If you go on to YouTube, you can watch this clip out there. But a lot of the things that were coming out of his mouth did not match what his body was saying. He had like this question inflection. Later in this book, we're going to say about a salesperson and saying, this costs $500. It's like you're changing the little tone at the end. So maybe when he got onto the stage for his Shark Tank pitch, he might have been like, this costs you for 10%, you'll get for $100,000, you'll get 10%. You know, not sure of how much he's actually asking for, how much they're going to get. He also does like a one-sided shrug with his shoulder, which is making him question it. Ultimately, none of the sharks bit on this deal. It's funny because now if you hear after the fact, it's actually the one deal that almost every single shark regrets not taking, because I think it actually is the most successful business ever to come through the Shark Tank. But it's ultimately because the cues in which Jamie was giving off just didn't match the words of what he was actually trying to say. Now, Vanessa Van Edwards, if you don't know who she is, she's a speaker, she's a researcher, she's a best-selling author. Her company, The Science of People, her team there conducts original research on human behavior and communication. She has experience leading corporate workshops for companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And she has YouTube tutorials, which have been watched by millions. Her mission is to make normally visible signals visible. helping listeners amplify their message and increase their impact. So when it comes to cues, there's 3 different elements to it. The first thing is decoding, which is reading other people's signals. People are going to give off their own cues, which we need to sort of decipher on our own to figure out if what they're saying is actually matching what they're trying to say. Then there's encoding, which is sending our own signals. So trying to get everything up in alignment so that way the messages that we're trying to get across are not being ruined, such as like with Jamie, by giving these different signals which just don't match up properly. And then there's internalizing, how cues affect your internal state. Often when people do certain cues, it's going to put you off a little bit to, like, for example, if somebody is, backing up, you might feel like, oh, maybe you push the boundaries too much. If they're touching you, you might feel like, if like on a date, you might be like, oh, wow, they're way more into me than I am. There could be many different ways in which these cues are impacting you positively or negatively, and they ultimately will impact your internal state. Now, cues are contagious. One person's emotions and behaviors can directly trigger similar feelings in others. Even seeing someone's facial expressions can subtly activate those muscles in your own face, causing you to feel the same emotion, which makes complete sense because generally speaking, when you're surrounded by a bunch of happy, smiling people, you're going to feel quite similar. It's hard to be around somebody who has a big smile and then you're just frowning and hating the day that you're around. Like, I love being around people with big smiles on their face because I feel like it just brightens up your day. And it's the same with a lot of these cues. When people have these cues that they're triggering different emotions in you, it's hard to not have them impact you in some sort of way. But having the ability to realize what's happening, that will help you a lot in life. So again, we're going to go through a majority of these different cues, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of them, and maybe then you'll understand why they're impacting you in certain ways. When it comes to cues, though, there is really no mute button. If you're ever trying to be sterile or mute, you still will give off cues. And these will ultimately send you into the danger zone, which ultimately make you feel boring, forgettable, and cold. The goal is alignment, not concealment. So we don't want to try to, when you hear about the things that I'm about to say, you don't want to be like, oh, I just got to try to push that away, because ultimately it's going to make you look even worse. It's about making subtle adjustments to make these work more for you than trying to just be like, I got to avoid that purposefully. And even some of these danger zone cues, sometimes there is reason why you do want to have them, but it's about knowing when is the right time and when is the right time to avoid it. So we're going to go through the 4 different stages. We'll start off with the danger zone, and then we'll work through everything up to the charismatic zone. But we'll start off with the danger zone, and these are essentially the red flags of communication. These are the ones that typically you'll want to avoid. Again, at the end, we'll go through reasons why you might want to include them. But generally speaking, if you can avoid the danger zone, it'll probably help you in becoming a little bit more effective at communicating with others. So what is the danger zone? This is where individuals are perceived as both low in warmth and competence, leading to being overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued. These cues are red flags that signal anxiety, boredom, confusion, defensiveness, or incompetence. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to come across as any of those. So if you can avoid these danger cues, it will make you definitely come across a lot better than if you happen to mix these in. So some examples of what danger cues are. There's the first one I'll say is distancing. I sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, which is when we dislike something or are being dishonest. We will physically distance ourselves from that person or that situation. Obviously, this example in the book is from before I was even born, so I can't say I've witnessed this up close. But apparently Richard Nixon in the Watergate scandal was taking large steps back after saying, I'm not a crook. I'm guessing he was a crook based off the wording of this. But because he was being dishonest, he was taking those steps back, which showed that what he was saying was not aligning with who he actually was. An example that lots of us probably do, especially nowadays, that everybody seems to be addicted to their phone. And I might mess up how you pronounce this, but she writes it as phubbing, Phubbing, which is apparently ignoring someone for your phone, which makes you appear less trustworthy. Ultimately, I think this is just rude in general. And if I see people playing with their phone when I'm trying to have conversations with them, it doesn't really make me feel that great. I wouldn't have necessarily said trustworthy was the thing that it makes me feel in those scenarios, but I can definitely understand why that might be the feeling that it gives somebody. So yeah, put that phone down when you're trying to have a conversation, because it doesn't necessarily make people feel good about you. And trustworthy is one of the things that it might make people feel less of. Then there's self-comforting, which are gestures that are used to soothe anxiety. Again, sometimes it might be good to soothe anxiety, but in general, it's going to make you probably feel a little bit less trustworthy there as well. An example of this is Britney Spears rubbing her calf and pulling her hair during a Dateline interview when asked about her relationship. And another example of this is a nose touch, which researchers found the nose heats up when people lie, which is quite funny because it's sort of like maybe how the idea of Pinocchio came along. You lie and then your nose grows. Maybe it's you lie and your nose heats up, which causes an itch ultimately. And apparently when Bill Clinton was doing his testimony for a scandal back in the day, he also was seen itching his nose, which goes along with the same sort of thing. And then there's blocking. This is something that I feel tons of people do, which is using your arms or an object to create a barrier, signaling closed-mindedness or a need for protection. Often people do this just on a day-to-day basis. They'll take something and clutch it in between them and something else. It makes you feel a little bit maybe more comfortable. But yes, it does make you definitely feel more closed off. Definitely when your hands are open, it's more inviting. But when you're, holding a book close to your chest or your bag in front of you, there's then that barrier, which definitely takes away from that closeness. An example of this that Vanessa uses is there was this guy, Brian Dean. He had a website where his photo was of him just like cross-armed, and he wasn't a very open posture. So it was blocking off his audience essentially. But just by changing that photo to open arms, he actually increased his conversion by 5.4%, which might not seem like a lot, but from one subtle change of just changing where the hands are from closed off to open, if I could get 5.4% more sales from changing that one photo on the header of my website, I would absolutely do that. Then there's shame, which can often be seen from touching the forehead or averting the gaze. If you remember the show Punk'd with Ashton Kutcher, he used to, pull pranks on a lot of famous people. And apparently there was this one time that he was pranking George Lopez. And the moment that he realized that he was getting punked, he took his hands and covered his face right instantly after that, which I totally get. If you get punked or if you get pranked, it's never a fun situation. So, feeling that, how'd this happen to me? Oh, this is unbelievable. First thing you do is hands to your face. And then there's resting bothered face, which is facial expressions that accidentally convey negative emotions like angered, so a furrowed brow, or sadness, drooped lids, a frown, or contempt, a mouth shrug, or a smirk, even when feeling neutral. In the presentation of Jamie Siminoff on Shark Tank, apparently Mark Cuban had a mouth shrug for a lot of it, which signaled that he was in disbelief or disengaged from the presentation. So again, you want to have a very happy face, not a resting bothered face, or I'm sure you can think of another way of saying that as well. And then there's vocal danger cues. There's vocal fry. So when you have a creaky, raspy voice, it often signals anxiety and undermines professional success. Or using verbal filler words like, so, like, yeah. It just destroys people's credibility, and it signals a nervousness or a lack of preparation. And then there's also vocal denials. So it sounds like, oof, yikes, ugh. They signal dislike or disengagement, even if unintended. I can't say I can remember people being like, oof, or yikes too much, but is thrown in all the time. People probably don't notice they're doing it, but when they dislike something, very easily it just comes out of people's mouths. So keep an eye for those. Now, while these cues don't always mean that someone is lying, they do signal anxiety, shame, or guilt, and they do warrant further investigation. True authenticity comes from congruence. So when your cues match your words, that's ultimately what you're trying to make happen. Now, reasons why you want to avoid danger zone is these cues undermine your credibility. They signal insecurity or anxiety, and they can be distracting or off-putting, leading to distrust and disengagement from others. Muting cues also sends you into this zone, making you appear sterile and boring. Now, why might you actually want to be in the danger zone? It sometimes is actually a good thing to do, but it needs to be used strategically. So in specific situations, they can subtly signal disapproval or disengagement. So a lip purse during negotiations for better concessions, they can tell that you're unhappy, so they know like, oh, I better tweak what I'm offering a little bit so that way they get a yes. Or to politely create boundaries, so stop fronting to end oversharing. If somebody's just going on and on and on about something that you do not feel comfortable about, if you start turning your body just slightly away, they might get the picture like, oh, maybe I've said too much here. Maybe they're not feeling too comfortable. Or even to help self-soothe. As I said before, like the Britney Spears example and stuff, sometimes you need to try to help lower your anxiety. There's like the touching right in the middle of the chest, right near the sternum. That sometimes helps bring down your anxiety, helps you calm yourself a little bit. And sometimes being a little bit calmer, even if it puts you a little bit into that danger zone, it might be better than just totally unraveling. So sometimes you want to do things that might put you into the danger zone. It's just that you don't want to stay in that zone. But moving on from there, this is where we're getting into the zones which you want to be in more often than not. And the first one that we're going to go over is warmth cues. They build trust, they build connection. You do want to have these. Even people who are charismatic, they're going to have warmth cues. So you want to have an understanding of these. It's about balancing warmth and competence, which is going to give you that charismatic communication in the end. So starting with the power of warmth. Warmth cues generate a halo effect, making everything about you seem more positive and inspiring trust, engagement, and creativity in others. Some of the nonverbal warmth cues that people will use are like head tilts. They show interest, curiosity, and appeasement. They increase the likability and your approachability. They literally signal, I really want to hear what you have to say. When I'm doing like sales and I'm trying to sell somebody, product or service, I'll often tilt my head a little bit just to make it seem, I am, to be honest, I'm listening intently to what they're saying, but by having that extra little head tilt, you can notice that it sort of just makes them feel like you're that much more into it. And there's famous paintings of this as well, like Girl with a Pearl Earring and Birth of Venus, which feature head tilts demonstrating their universal appeal for approachability. Or maybe if you're out on a date, you just like give that little bit of head tilt so that way they know that you're really, really listening to what they're having to say. Probably increase your chances of a second date. Another nonverbal warmth cue is nodding, signaling agreement, encouragement, and empathy, making people feel heard and inspiring agreements. Slow, thoughtful nods are key. Apparently, there's an example of lawyers found that jurors nodding in agreement influences other jurors' opinions and votes in trials. So when one of the jurors was like, yeah, that makes sense, nodding up and down, then other people saw the jurors nodding and they're like, yeah. Then they all become in agreement, and maybe that's how they get their result, is just because everybody's nodding their heads. But sometimes nodding can actually work in the opposite effect. Sometimes you'll nod what is the actual result or what is true, even though you're saying something different. An example of this is A-Rod when he was being accused of taking steroids. He was saying no, but he was shaking his head yes, which often helps indicate like what you're saying is not in congruence to what is actually being shown by your body language. So yeah, agreeing with people by nodding with just a slight, subtle head nod, it's great. And then eyebrow raises, a quick way to show interest, curiosity, and attention, used to seek confirmation of active listening. Apparently, when Neil deGrasse Tyson is taking flights around the world, he often likes to talk with fellow passengers, and he used actually subtle eyebrow raises to gauge which facts to be included in his best-selling book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, because when their eyes lit up and they had the eyebrows raised, clearly that was something that an average person might want to know about. I believe that's what the premise of the book is. It's for the everyday person, at a very simplified version of it. So if he's talking to some random person on a plane and they're quite engaged because their eyebrows are raised, it's like, yes, I should use this in my book. And then there's a savor smile, which is essentially an authentic smile that reaches the eyes, activating the little crow's feet, which if you have like that really big smile, then there's like the little squint in the corner of the eye, which if you took like a close-up photo, sort of looks like a little crow's foot there. These authentic smiles are memorable and trigger positive emotions in others, and they take longer to spread, indicating genuine relish in someone's presence. Disney parks, when they're doing training with all their employees, they make it known that every single guest interaction and communication should start with direct eye contact and a sincere smile, which might be why people always find Disney World so happy. Although I've watched videos lately with all their sky-high prices, it might not be so much the case now. But overall, the people who work there, they do always have that very happy interactions with their customers to make you just really enjoy your time there. And then there's appropriate touch, which touch in general increases trust, warmth, and rapport by releasing oxytocin. One of the examples that she used, I actually think is really quite interesting. Apparently, in the NBA, teams found that teams who touched more won more, which, that's such a simple thing to do to try to win more games. But apparently, the teams who touched more, so things like high five, arm draps, back pats, probably butt taps, it's not in the list there, but, just touch more, they actually won more games, which if I was ever coaching a team, I would definitely be like, dab up each other, because if that's going to lead to more wins and we don't even have to get better skilled wise, that's pretty cool. Another example of this is servers who lightly touch customers' hands or arms receive significantly higher tips. I wish I knew this when I was serving. I would have definitely tapped a couple more arms, be like, oh, you're so funny, with a little touch. Then my tip goes up 10%. That'd be awesome. Maybe I would have never gone into a different career because I just would have been touching all these arms and getting so much more money. Nah. But that's cool if you are in the service industry and you do want work for tips. Yeah. Touch those arms, those shoulders. Again, appropriate touch, not inappropriate. And then there's mirroring. So subtly matching another positive nonverbal behavior to build rapport and emotional synchronicity. In sales, which is what I do on a daily basis, I think this is one of the most powerful things you can do, which is matching what the other person's doing. If somebody's getting closer, you get closer. If somebody's backing up, you back up. If somebody's, talking really loudly, you talk really loudly. If somebody's talking very softly, you talk very softly. But trying to match and mirror all the different things that they're doing, you don't want to imitate them. But if you can just make it resemble, it definitely increases that rapport. An example of this, or a bad example of this actually, that is used in the book is there's this one employee at a hotel reception. It's super, super early. I think it's 4 a.m. And she's just overly over the top cheerful and just full of energy. But she actually struggles to make the guests feel welcome because she wasn't meeting them at their energy level. She was at a 10 and they were at a 2. When there's that big of a discrepancy, it's going to be hard to actually feel very good. But another example of this, there's a doctor, his name's Dr. Coffee Essels, and he tries to match and mirror every single patient. He also does some other cool stuff too, gets down on one knee when he's talking to the kids, so he's more at their eye height. But he just tries to match his patient's mood, which ultimately makes them feel a lot more comfortable when dealing with them. So he ends up being a very favorite doctor of theirs. So different types of warmth cues. We have also our vocal warmth cues. So memorable vocal first impressions. Your first spoken word, which is often a hello, forms a quick impression. Neutral or positive hellos spoken on an out of breath are more likable. So if you finish with whatever you're saying out of breath, apparently it comes across a lot better than if you are full of breath afterwards. I don't really know the reasoning behind this. I don't think I quite understood it. But apparently if you can just get out of breath when you're saying something, it makes people find your first impression more memorable. The second bit, though, sounding friendly, verbal hugs. This one definitely works. Again, I'm for sure the other one does too, but using warm-up phrases like, so good to hear from you. I'm sending you a virtual hug to create connection, even in a virtual setting. Obviously, that sending a virtual hug is probably more for the Zoom call. But when somebody says so good to hear from you, that is nice. It's so much better than just a hello, how are you? But it's so good to hear from you. So just choosing those types of words can actually make a huge impact. Then there's sounding interesting, just having some vocal variety, infusing emotion into your voice, avoiding monotony and unscripted emotional parts of your delivery to captivate the listener. Emotion really helps people remember what it is that you're saying. If you're just, hi, my name is Kyle. I hope you're having a great day. That's pretty boring. But if you say, hey, my name is Kyle. I hope you're having a great day. There's a little bit more playfulness to that, and it's definitely going to make people feel like you're a little bit more interesting of a person. And then sounding encouraging and inviting, a vocal invitation, using listening sounds like, aha, and encouraging words like, yes, go on, to affirm and welcome others. I think the example that they use here is actually quite funny. It's in a Starbucks drive-thru, an employee being like, good choice. Oh, yum. Ah, excellent idea, to make their customer feel like it's an excellent order. I can't really remember a time when a employee has done something like this, but if I had a Starbucks, which is a place I love going to get my coffee, if they're like, oh, yum, great choice, I'd be like, wow, I need to go back to the Starbucks so soon because I want to just feel like I'm making the best decision ever when I'm ordering that. Maybe a nitro cold brew. That's probably my favorite thing from Starbucks. But wow, that would make me feel so good. So sounding encouraging and inviting Those are definitely things I would add into there because, oh, yum. That's where it's at. Oh, yum. That is an excellent idea. Wow. I think if there's anything from these warmth cues that I took away, that's probably the one. I like it. I think it's really good. But why might you want to add warmth cues? Ultimately, it's to build trust, it's to build rapport, it's to build collaboration. They make you feel more approachable and kind, and they ultimately encourage others to open up. They can also soften difficult messages and enhance your overall likability. But there are times where you want to also avoid warmth cues. Excessive use can make you seem impatient, overly warm, less powerful, less serious. And fake warmth cues are easily detected and counterproductive. I always say actually this when working with my sales team. You don't really want like a fake a smile. You want to have a genuine smile. So if you go into a door and you're knocking and you don't actually have a real smile on your face, think of something that you're grateful for, or think of, a really funny thought in your head, get a real smile on your face because it's going to actually just come across more real when you knock on that door. Going back to this, over-signaling warmth can also make it harder to be taken seriously on competence. And apparently this is especially true for women. The next cue that we're going to go over, though, is on the competence cues. And this is projecting capability and credibility. It's the look of power. Competence cues can make people take you seriously and believe in your ideas. A powerful posture and precise movements contribute to this perception. Some of the nonverbal competence cues that we can benefit from are having a powerful posture, taking up space with relaxed shoulders, wide feet, and open hands, signaling confidence and actually makes you feel more powerful. Again, going back to the Nixon-Kennedy time, so back in the 1960s, which again, obviously, I don't know much about, but it's talked about in the book. Kennedy is calm and planted and is confident posture in the debate that he has with Nixon, where Nixon is anxious, fidgeting, white-knuckled, and apparently this had a huge influence on voter perception just from the debate and the postures in which they held during that time together on stage where they can actually be, compared against each other. Another nonverbal competence cue is the lower lid flex. I just watched a video on this the other day because I didn't quite understand what they meant by the lower lid flex, but it's the all-seeing, the all-knowing. It's the hardening of the lower lid. So the bottom part, sort of like as if you're in a squint, and it signals intensity, scrutiny, and deep thought, promoting pause and clarification from others. It's often seen in the sexiest man alive photos. In the video that I just watched to show the under eye squint, she talks about it being like, if you're on a date as a guy and you do that lower lid flex, it just shows like you're like really invested in that woman across from you. Again, probably with like the sexiest man alive photo. So it's like a squint, but with this like really deep intrigue into what's going on the other side, and that's why you're trying to get a closer look. So that's sort of what the lower lid flex is. And then there's a smart people steeple, which is the hand gesture where your fingertips are together, and that conveys confidence, contemplation, and relaxation. It's a power pose for your hands. An example of this, going back to Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary does this actually a lot when thinking about how to structure a deal, or if he actually wants to offer it. It's like getting those fingers together and thinking, how should I make this deal? It shows that, he has that confidence and he's ready to make that deal to overtake all the other people, which will probably not get the deal since I think his deals are the worst personally. But explanatory gestures, so purposeful hand movements that expand, explain, and emphasize verbal messages, improving comprehension. One of the people that Vanessa talks about is Maria Konnikova, who's a professional poker player. She learned that skilled players with winning hands moved smoothly and fluidly, and that observing hands was actually more telling than faces. Clearly, I don't play enough poker, so I can't really make a comment on this, but if I ever do go play poker, it'd be cool to check out those hands and see if they tell me more than the faces. Where I do think this is a lot more noticeable for myself, I've done a lot of public speaking, but in popular TED Talks, you can significantly see that they use more explanatory gestures, such as like numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, size, big, small, me, you, them, us, to help audiences track the understanding of content. I think hand gestures are just such a vital tool that we have to give off messages. I know when I'm doing a sales pitch, I use hand gestures with everything, especially with the numbers, pointing to the product, pointing to different places around, gesturing sort of like the impact it can make. And I think sometimes people are a lot more visual, so having that hand gesture just sort of helps guide people a little bit better. And then there's palm power, so exposing palm cues attention and signals openness, honesty, and acknowledgement. She talks about this one famous speaker, Evita, famously uses palm flashes to command attention and to guide her audience during speeches. How to nicely get someone to stop interrupting you too. Use subtle nonverbal cues like the fish, so a slightly open mouth, being like, signaling that you want to speak. The bookmark, you raise the one finger, be like, yo, 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 I got something. Finger to hold your place. Or the anchor touch, so to lightly touch to break a monologue when people are just going on and on and on and on and on. You're just like, hey, do you mind if I say something? Or I got to get out of here. But they just go on and on and on. So those 3 different ways are ways to show that competence in a positive way. Then there's the vocal power cues. So sounding confident with a low tone. Speaking in the lowest comfortable pitch projects power and makes you feel more powerful and think abstractly. Apparently, Elizabeth Holmes, who is the founder of Theranos, which, if you remember who she is, I'm pretty sure it's like one of the biggest scam companies of all times. They could get like a dab of blood and find out all this information on you. It didn't actually work. Definitely before its time, because I don't think they even have those things now. But she talked in a very low baritone voice, which made her seem very fake and unnatural, because it wasn't who she actually was. She was just trying to be perceived as more confident. But again, as I would have mentioned earlier, sometimes when you try to fake a cue, it doesn't come off correctly, and then people can see through that. Being taken seriously, so through a neutral inflection, avoiding the question inflection, the uptalk at the end of the statement prevents listeners from doubting your credibility or prices. And an example for this is that sales rep that I spoke about at the beginning. He lost deals because he quoted prices with a question inflection. The price of our service is $500. It's like that little extra tone there. I was actually told here in New Zealand to look out for this. I'm doing a comedy course right now, and apparently a lot of comedians do that little uptick at the end. I noticed that my teacher does this, and when I went to a show the other week, literally half, if not all, of the comedians, they all do this little uptick at the end. So it doesn't actually come across as if you know your stuff. It's like you're questioning, is that actually the punchline? Was that what I was supposed to say? You want to hit it. You want to be like, I got this. So going back to the sales, like, the price of our service is $500. There's no negotiation. That is what it is. If you say a punchline, no, that's how I was supposed to say it. I'm not questioning if I remembered it correctly. That is the joke. You want to your volume control shows emotional control, varying volume to highlight important points. speaking louder for excitement or softer for secrets, signaling mastery of your message. If you're super confident in something, speak loud and proud. If you don't want everybody else to hear, bring it down, talk it slowly into somebody's ear. But the volume in which you deliver your message definitely comes across as, competence. If I'm on stage and I'm giving a presentation and I'm like, hi, everybody, it's so nice to be here. It's not going to sound like I'm actually happy to be there. It's not going to be like I feel confident on that stage. Hey, everybody, it's so nice to be here. It just comes across so much different. So the volume in which you deliver will greatly impact your competence. And then pause for power. Pausing is totally fine. I went to a Toastmasters meeting the other day, and I was doing a table topics, which is where you get up onto stage, they give you a topic, and you just go. One person said to me afterwards, oh, you pause like you knew exactly what you were going to do. It's like, no, I paused to think about it, because if I just get there and start going yeah, it just ruins that I feel even comfortable up on the stage. So using a pause, a breathing pause, like you need to take breath. So when you take a breath, don't put in a filler, just pause, think, say. In the podcast here, there's times where I might not say something for like a couple seconds. It's probably me thinking in my head. I could just be yeah. It's not going to make me feel like I know what I'm talking about. So slow down the speech. It increases comprehension and it creates intrigue before important points. So if you got like a real big banger of a point and you really want it to hit, pause for a second and then let it go. Verbal cues. Power words. Certain words inherently convey competence. There's an example that Vanessa uses where just the name of a game, changing it, impacts the results of it. So the games that they use is called the community game versus the Wall Street game. Community game's warm. The Wall Street game's competent, but it influences people's behavior massively. In the community game, people actually work together because it's a community. When it's the Wall Street game, it's a little bit more cutthroat. People are in it for them. So just changing those words has such a big impact on the ultimate impact of it. Then there's imagery cues. So elevating the look and brand using things like color, font. Visual metaphors can elevate perception and convey competence. An example that she used here is the candy brand Sugarfina. Through using expensive, although it is an expensive candy, they elevate their brand with luxurious packaging and a sales experience similar to like fine jewelry or sort of like Apple. When you go in, it's not like just chocolate everywhere. It's just like small amounts of chocolate. You go to somebody, they help you pick out that chocolate. They present it in that beautiful box for you. You're like, wow, this is going to be such an experience eating later. But it just makes it seem like it's much better than it actually is. The chocolate might taste just as good as a random chocolate from a grocery store, but because it's delivered in that different way, it's just like, wow, that's going to be some good chocolate. And then there's this company Caviar, and an email that they sent out, which timed with the royal wedding, used elegant fonts and imagery that resembled a wedding invitation to elevate their services. So again, you can elevate it just based off things like that, your colors, your font, visual metaphors, and then images that inspire. So visual cues that can inspire specific feeling or association. She uses two examples of two different plumbing companies. One's called Einstein Plumbing, which uses a cartoon of Einstein on their trucks to cue intelligence and problem solving, while another plumbing company uses pink trucks with women pictures to cue politeness and cleanliness. Apparently women are cleaner than men. So I guess if you're doing plumbing and you don't want to mess everywhere, you go with the pink one. But if you got a really tough situation and you're not sure how it can be solved, you go with Einstein. And then there's nonverbal brand. So using visual cues such as clothes, office decor, personal style to signal values, culture, and personality. Benjamin Franklin, when he went over to the UK to visit the royal family, he chose to go in American cotton over, at the time, the more formal look of the powdered wig. I don't really understand the powdered wig at all. But he was one of the people who changed it all up. Thank for that. Now it's more acceptable. I know this is a couple hundred years later, but now that is the look that we have, is cotton shirts. And thank God for that, because I'm very happy I don't have to be wearing a wig on this podcast right now. I think that'd be a very weird look. But this was to project a pioneer spirit. And then television producer Lee Tomlinson wears a hospital gown during a presentation to evoke compassion and to symbolize his journey, because he was a cancer survivor. So again, the clothes and stuff that you wear, the decor around you, setting up this podcast, I could have just had the background be anything, but I wanted to make it seem a little bit more polished. So I set up that nice little black acoustic panel backdrop, TV with the logo on it, just to give it that more professional look. Now, when do you want to add competence cues? Ultimately, very simple. It's to build credibility, to project your power, and to be taken seriously in crucial situations like pitches or negotiations. They signal focus, determination, and knowledge, and they help others understand and agree with your message. But there are some times where you would want to avoid competence cues because they can make you seem intimidating or unapproachable. Overly dominant cues can hinder de-escalation, and excessive gesturing can distance and distract people. For men specifically, too much competence can make them appear less kind and approachable. Now, we have that understanding of both warmth and we have that understanding of competence, but the charisma sweet spot is blending and activating those cues, mixing them together. So the charisma equation is, when true charisma is a special blend of warmth, can I trust you? And competence, can I rely on you? There's different flavors of charisma. There's different charismatic individuals achieve charisma in a balance of unique ways. Examples of this would be like Oprah Winfrey. She leans more towards the warmth side of things while grounded it with competence, while Margaret Thatcher, I believe UK politician, apparently leaned more towards competence, but with enough warmth to be trusted. It's a little bit of a dial. You can adjust this to work with each situation. The most charismatic people flexibly adjust their warmth and competence cues based off the situation and person. So, for example, Jeff Bezos apparently dials up his warmth for casual office tours and then competence for serious, legacy discussions, while always maintaining a particular balance in between the two. Now, when and how will you apply cues to your interactions? When you're solving people's problems, it's understanding that people often seek either inspiration, so warmth in stories, or information, competence in data. So you want to tailor your communication style, including the verbal cues, to your audience. You want to be sort of like a verbal chameleon. You want to subtly mimic the positive or neutral words someone uses to match their charisma style and to build rapport. Ellen DeGeneres often verbally mirrors guests on her show to quickly bond with them. I used to love watching that show back in the day. But she was very good at just, building that instant rapport by matching and mirroring what the other guests were doing. Sometimes I feel like she would say almost word for word what it is that they said back to them and in a similar style, but it puts a smile on their face and then it gets them quite engaged. An example of this that Vanessa has from a case study of hers is a guy named Dave, which was a client, and she transformed him from a boring, sterile person when it came to team meetings by consciously applying a range of cues. So taking him from where he was to making a grand entrance, using open body language, fronting with the speaker, using that steeple gesture, incorporating humor and engaging questions. This boosted the engagement overall and his leadership confidence. So they're just small little tweaks, but they made that meeting so much better. Probably made it so people wanted to be there, took them more seriously, but also felt more connected with them. So a good balance of it all. Now, why you may want to add charisma cues, it's to make your interactions more memorable and impactful, ensuring people are actually listening and find you engaging. They allow you to dynamically adapt your communication, foster broad appeal, and inspire confidence in others by appearing both impressive and collaborative. Now, there are reasons why you might want to avoid charismatic cues, and it might be because of avoiding mimicking cues unnaturally. Authenticity is crucial. You don't want to fake expertise or warmth, as inauthenticity will be perceived. Also, avoid being emotionless or using over-sterile language, as this can make communication boring and lead to less opportunities. So again, it's not about faking it till you make it. It's about adjusting it to work for you. So, what is it going to be for your charismatic future? How can you take everything that was briefly gone over today and apply it to your life to make your life better? I've got 5 key takeaways here. You want to use cues as your secret language. They're profoundly impactful, how you're perceived, often more than your words. So you want to just make sure that these cues are working towards your benefit. So just make sure that when you're saying something, it's not mis out alignment. So let's say if you're giving a presentation, record it, you can look back at it and just see if the things are matching. You also want to have balance being key. True charisma lies with a blend of both warmth and trust. Warmth and competence, so trust and reliability. Understanding where you naturally lean and then adjusting that dial to make it work. And then authenticity matters. You don't want to fake these cues. You want to use them to enhance your genuine connection and skill. If you don't feel it, work on the underlying issue first. Practicing is power. Integrate new cues purposefully. Use the rule of 3. Try each cue at least 3 times in different scenarios to make it feel natural. If it still doesn't feel natural, then you might need to not use it. It might not be the cue for you. But try at least 3 different times in 3 different scenarios and then see what works. And just know that you have the power to change. Everyone can improve their cues. Small conscious adjustments can lead to significant shifts in your communication and your confidence. So, with everything that we went over in mind, this is what I would suggest you do. Start engaging with these cues. Start observing cues in others. So start decoding what people are doing. And then start experimenting with your own. Start encoding your own cues. Once you have a good understanding of that, then you can start making those adjustments. And so a great way of being able to self-reflect on these is something that's at the back of this book. It might also be on our website, it's thescienceofpeople.com, possibly /bonus. You might be able to find it there, but it's a cues chart, which allows you to track the learning and internalize the impacts of these different cues. So I would challenge you over the next, week or 2 is to start observing at those cues, both yours and other people's. And then if you have a chance to get that chart, whether it's in the book or it's from the website, start tracking and learning and internalizing the impacts of these cues. So obviously, if you want to get more information on this, you can obviously start with the book. So I got the digital copy right here, cues. And you can always check out her website, so thescienceofpeople.com. She has a bunch of digital bonuses. So if you go /bonus, you can get the digital bonuses, the templates, the videos, demos. If you're not sure what certain things are, if I didn't explain it clear enough, there is often visual videos to go along with everything. She has courses like the People School for advanced interpersonal skills. You can learn more about public speaking with powerful presentations, and you can practice reading facial expressions with the Decode software. But ultimately, I hope you're able to take a lot away from today's episode. I hope it will add some sort of tool to your toolbox, which will help you excel in different areas. And I hope you keep on coming back every 2 weeks. We might be changing it to a weekly podcast, but at least for now, coming back every 2 weeks so that way we can continue to learn and grow together. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to having you back in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.